A couple of minutes before the top of the hour now. Let's get a quick check on Wall Street. The Dow actually broke 10,000.
Yeah, so we'll be covering that. We're going to be talking with somebody, a royal expert, is it?
That's right. We've got a royal expert to talk about that. And also the controversy about this kitty. I mean, there are dog lovers and cat lovers, but there's a real
The royal family, really.
Sort of a royal rebel, and she died before her time, died last week in her early 70s. They are going to, they're in the middle of the services now, and those services are closed to the public, but we've got an expert who's going to be coming along to sort of fill you in on what's going on with the royal family these days.
That's right, and that is coming up next right here on Fox News Channel. I'll be right back with that.
This program is brought to you by Walgreens, the pharmacy America trusts.
In a valley near a river, there's a place called...
This morning by royal family expert Richard Meinards. Richard, thanks for being here.
Good morning.
John and I were talking earlier and noting that in a way she was the first Diana.
Oh, indeed. Princess Margaret was certainly the royal rebel. She was obviously very much overshadowed by her sister Elizabeth, who became the Queen. But of course, she was very much the glamour puss of her age back in the 50s and 60s. She was a very, very beautiful woman, the fashion icon of her time, as Diana was back in the 80s and 90s. And sadly, she led a very unhappy life, given that she had to give up the man she really loved, Peter Townsend, back in the 40s. And of course, she had a very controversial life from then on, and was very much criticized by the British media and the British public.
Well, fill us in. Why'd she have to give him up?
Well, because her sister, as the monarch, was the head of the Church of England, the religion of Britain, and it was felt that Peter Townsend, at that time, as a divorced man, was an inappropriate husband for Princess Margaret. And Princess Margaret then gave him up because I think she was rather pressured into giving up the man she loved, and also the fact that she felt that it was her royal duty to follow the Queen's behest, as it were, and carried on from there. And as we know, she married Lord Snowdon and divorced him, and I think the latter part of her life was exceedingly unhappy for her.
She liked to hang out with celebrities, didn't she? I caught a picture of her with the Beatles at the premiere of the movie Help back in the 60s.
Oh, absolutely. She loved the whole thing about nightlife and celebrities and the glitz and the glamour and the Hollywood side of things, very much more so than the Queen does. And as I say, at the time, Margaret was considered the royal rebel, certainly the glamour puss of her time. And of course, her latter years were polar opposite to the life she led back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s with people like Mick Jagger and Peter Sellers and, as you say, the Beatles.
Did she resent the position that she found herself in relative to her sister? I mean, was there some bitterness?
Well, I think she never publicly voiced resentment, but I think she felt some resentment, one that she'd been put in this position by dint of her birth being after the Queen. And I think in some ways it was of some help to her because it gave her a lot more flexibility and freedom, something the Queen has never had. But on the other hand, she was always in the shadow of the big sister. And I think in some ways she did resent that.
We see the people outside lining up. Was she as loved as Diana, the people's princess, was?
Well, I would love to say she was, but I think absolutely not. I think Diana, when she died in '97, was by then a global, worldwide icon, and there was global grief and outpouring at the time. Margaret was considered a very controversial figure. She was much criticized for not pulling her weight. She could also be very imperious and very arrogant and, in fact, downright rude when she did some royal duties, and was considered not to be pulling her weight within the royal family. So it's certainly more of a loss for the royal family than it is for Britain, as perceived by many of her critics.
Why not make this service public, Richard? Do you have any inside information on that?
Because in the last few years, even before her stroke, she was withdrawing from public duties. She wasn't considered so much of a public figure, and the royal family, as we all know, is not as popular as it was back in the 50s, 60s, even the 70s. So this is very much a sort of quasi-private, somewhat public occasion where there is one camera position, as you know, focused on the St. George's Chapel, Windsor, where the funeral is now taking place. But it really is very much a private ceremony.
Now, I understand, Richard, the Queen Mum, it was said that she was going to make it today. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yes, indeed. It was all going to be a last-minute decision as to whether the Queen Mother, who's going to be 102 on August 4th, would make it. She's been somewhat ill in the last 2 months at Sandringham, the Queen's home in the southeast of England, with a sort of flu, chesty cold. But she flew by helicopter, about a 45-minute flight from Sandringham to Windsor a couple of days ago, and she was very much determined, come hell or high water, to make the funeral of her youngest daughter.
We also noticed the arrival of Prince Charles, the young princes. It looked like Andrew was there, but not Fergie.
No, I mean, Fergie is obviously divorced from Andrew. I know they lived together in the same house at Sunninghill, but she's very much considered an outcast, particularly by the Queen's husband, Prince Philip. And this is essentially really a family occasion, and I think that the Queen and the other members of the royal family do not consider Fergie part of the family.
A lot of dysfunction in that family these days.
Well, the unhappy wives of Windsor, they have nothing to be merry about.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, Richard Meinards from the correspondent. Thanks very much, Richard, for being with us.
My pleasure.
Before we go to a break, we want to show you some new pictures that we're getting in from London. This, of course, is the scene outside Windsor Castle, where the royal family has gathered to bid farewell to Princess Margaret. Even the 101-year-old Queen Mother fighting off some health problems and making it to the funeral today. Margaret, we've been talking about her throughout the morning. She had such a glitzy lifestyle that really defied royal convention, and it was the same for her in a sense in death. She's being cremated instead of buried. She is Queen Elizabeth's younger sister. She died after a stroke on Saturday at the age of 71. The funeral at St. George's Chapel, right within the precincts of Windsor Castle. Right now you see the flower-covered casket, which had been staying in, I believe, Tudor Chapel overnight at Windsor Castle, but now driving by. And as you can see there's a Union Jack flag and all the people gathered to see her, and also perhaps to catch a glimpse of some of the other royals. Earlier today, among the arrivals, of course, we saw Prince Charles. We also saw his two sons, William and Harry. We saw Prince Andrew, Fergie not among them, but again, a gathering point for the British royals today as Britain says goodbye to Princess Margaret, as we say, Queen Elizabeth's younger sister, who died of a stroke last Saturday, age 71. She died just 3 days, by the way, after her sister marked the 50th anniversary of her ascension to the throne, which did cast somewhat of a shadow over the Queen's Golden Jubilee celebrations. And once again, you are looking at pictures of the casket of Princess Margaret. Royal family is gathered today for her funeral, a private affair, although we were able to get a couple of pictures from inside Windsor Castle a little bit earlier today. We also saw the arrivals, but now the funeral procession making its way through. Just a little while ago, we saw some of the shots of the crowd. Interestingly, one of the royal experts that we were talking to earlier said that she wasn't as loved as Princess Diana. Certainly, probably nobody among the royal family could say that. But they say that she was the first Diana. She was a rebellious royal. She was somebody who loved to hang out with celebrities. Among her friends, Mick Jagger, Peter Sellers. Back in 1965, she was able to hang out with the Beatles even at the premiere of the movie Help. She also, there was so much controversy surrounding her life. Any royal watchers will remember that when she was only 14 years old, she became infatuated with this Royal Air Force Group Captain Peter Townsend. He was 29. He was married at the time. Her infatuation developed into a romance. And then later, when she would have been able to marry him, he got a divorce. She found out that if she did that, she would have to give up her claim to the throne and leave England for at least 5 years. So she decided not to pursue the romance, and she had a very, very famous quote at the time saying, Mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble, she decided to give him up. Later she did marry. She did go on to having 2 children with the Earl of Snowdon, photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones. And as we say, 2 children. She's being mourned today, by the way. We saw earlier, we saw Prince Charles, we saw Princes Harry and William. Of course, they're always in the news there. And Princess Margaret being cremated, also breaking with royal tradition, as she did in so many different ways throughout her life. The princess dying just last Saturday at age of 71. Queen Elizabeth's younger sister dying just a mere 3 days after her sister, the Queen, marking her 50th anniversary of her ascension to the throne. And today, the funeral and the final farewell for Princess Margaret.